All right, welcome into the Butt and Breneman show. The regular season is behind us. Adam, it's great to see you. I know we're in bowl season, but this is our first show since Selection Sunday, the infamous day that Florida State was in until they weren't. They did everything they could, but Bama was a better team is the debate, right? Is it most deserving or better team? I know by now this conversation has been explored from a number of different angles, but we haven't explored it. And I wanted to just ask you, just right away, did you agree with the committee? Why not?
I agreed with the committee's choice. I'll say this. I didn't like that I agreed with it. I felt bad about it. I feel bad for Jordan Travis. I mean, his tweet, that was a heartbreaking tweet to read, talking about, I'm sorry, I wish I would have gotten hurt earlier in the season so that they could see what kind of team this was. I didn't like it. But at the end of the day, I believe, and from everything I read and saw what the committee was saying and saw their guidelines, and that their job is to pick the 4 best teams in the college football playoff, and I believe they got that right. I believe that Florida State without Jordan Travis is such a different team, and we saw it in their ACC championship game. We saw they are a different team, and they are not better than Alabama. They're not one of the top 4 teams in the country without Jordan Travis, and Alabama, after beating Georgia, proved that they are. So I think the committee got it right, and I think we could go on for this for a while, and I'm sure we will, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Jake. But I think that you can kind of live in both worlds. Like, I can feel bad for Florida State, but still think that the committee made the right choice putting Alabama in, because if we're trying to find a champion and who is the best team in the country, those are the 4 teams that should be playing it out.
I have a real issue with that, and I think those statements contradict themselves. If we're trying to find out who the best team is, well, why doesn't the committee just pick who they think the best team is? Why play it, right? The committee, in a subjective, opinionated deal right now, just picked who the best 4 is. Here's another contradiction. Georgia's one of the best 4 teams in the country. They lost a tough game to Alabama. They're one of the best 4 teams in the country. That's a contradiction. I also say, when did we start saying the committee has to pick the best 4? This is the first time I've ever heard that. We didn't even hear it earlier in the season. Ohio State was the number 1 team in the country. You and I came on this same show. We said, they're probably not the number 1 team in the country, but they are the most deserving. Their resume looks great, right? So we even contradicted that within the season. It's the greatest sport ever because of the potential to upset. Why did Washington and Oregon even play in the Pac-12 championship? Oregon was favored by 10 points. They were the better team. No, they weren't. Washington won. I think about the Giants and the Patriots, the undefeated New England Patriots, maybe the best team of all time, and the Giants get it done. There's been time and time proven again of teams doing the unexplainable, and that's what makes football so great. I just don't understand how we just all of a sudden decide it's the best 4. Actually, I do understand, because boy, these numbers in the Rose Bowl and the national, the numbers of this playoff are going to set records. And
stop with your conspiracy theory stuff. Don't go there.
You're telling me money was not even a thought or a factor? Are you going to tell me money was not a thought, a conversation, or a factor?
Here's my question for you. I get how you feel about the most deserving, and Florida State deserves a chance. I get all that, and I'm with you. I'm proud of the season. Florida State had a great year. They did a really tough thing and win games after they lost their star quarterback. But it wasn't like losing a receiver or a running back. It was their whole team. They lost Jordan Travis, who was the most important factor in that team. So are you telling me right now that if you're trying to crown the national champion, who the best team in the country is, that you really believe that Florida State deserves to be in that 4-team conversation right now, trying to find out who the very best team in the country is, and that Alabama shouldn't be one of them? Is that actually you actually believe that?
Yes, because we're making this whole conversation because Bama beat Georgia. What about when Alabama struggled with a 6-6 Auburn team? Are they the best team? What about when they struggled with USF early in the season? What about when they got smoked in their own stadium by Texas? I can pick and choose, if we really wanted to have the conversation and form a complete narrative of why Bama isn't one of the best 4. They looked like the best 4 at times. They didn't at other times. Let's just be real here. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I understand. I'm not going to sit here and be, say that we're living in a utopia and that everything's perfect. Money drives a lot of this. And if it's a close factor, you have to take the financially sound choice. So again, I'm excited for the playoffs. I'm fine with it, but I don't like it. Florida State, what about their defense? It's a team sport. The way they stepped up, they were with their third string quarterback against a pretty damn good Louisville team. This is I could make the case for and against Florida State. I can make the case for and against Alabama. You know what I mean? They struggled. How many times did they struggle that year? And they're the best four? Why don't we use those as data points to debate it?
Yeah, I do think you make a point, and I tweeted this earlier in the week about Georgia, and like if we actually are going for best teams, that Georgia. Like I actually, Jake, before the committee announced I kept thinking in my head, is the number one team in the country, Georgia, losing at the last minute to Alabama on some questionable calls, really going to drop them out of the top four? So I think you make the case that Georgia belongs in the top four. Then you get into like who do you leave out then at that point? But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I stand by believing that the committee got it right, given that everything I know and everything I've seen and everything that the committee has to do. And I think that for the most competitive playoff environment, that they got the four best teams in the playoff. It's not fair to Florida State, but I also think it's part of the other part of this is like no one's going to agree on this. Like we're not going to agree, Jake, and that's part of the reason. Like that's part of the flaw of college football right now, and that's why it needs to change. And that like it's changing next season. Like we've got ourselves, college football's got themselves in this situation where a committee picks the four best teams. We're the only sport in the world that does it that way, right? Like no one else does it. And Mike Leach has rest in peace, has a famous like whole soliloquy on this where like, if we were so smart, why doesn't the NFL and everyone do it our way? We're the only ones to have a committee. It's been flawed for a while, and it's about time it's going to change next year with the automatic bids, and which is the way it should be.
Hey, listen, I agree with you that if the goal is to make have competitive balance in excellent games, these matchups are historically great. I do think they're going to smoke every previous number that we've ever seen. The storylines are amazing. It's the flaw. It's also the greatness. Like the emotional investment by fans in us talking about is what makes it great. I really just, dude, opinions are opinions. This is why we learn in stats class back in high school about human error, right? There's human error on things. The committee may or may not be experts on college football as a whole. They may or may not be experts on the top 10, 15, 20 teams. I doubt the committee's watching every game of every team. So with that, like I have an issue, and I think it presents itself to real issues if we're saying, hey, group of people committee that may or may not be experts, you get to pick the subjective opinion of the best four teams. I don't know. I wish they've changed their reasoning on the top. It's been the lack of consistency that bothers me more than anything. And I wonder if there's a way we can do an algorithm. Can we get a computer to say, here is the way you do it? It was that way, right? Can we find a balance between the two? Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, next year we're going to get what we want. Now there will still be these kind of discussions. It will just be less consequential, but the discussions will be even more. Like there's going to be even more debate next year because you're going to have the at-large, you're going to have the conference champions, and you're going to have the at-large bids, and there's going to be more spots and more teams because like the gap between like picking the top four is probably much easier than picking like the 8 through 20 range. Like where do you put like because that's where it varies. Like it's going to be not as consequential. Like it's going to be not as big of a top, but there will be even more debate over who 100%. Actually gets left in and put in the playoff.
Oh, 100%, man. I know. This is it. It solves some things. Every time you solve something, you create another problem. Maybe that's a circle of life, right? But okay, here's what we do know. This might be the most watched semifinal game of all time, Michigan versus Bama. So let's get into it with the preview. Just big picture thoughts. Like, what are you excited to see? What do you think will matter in the game?
Yeah, I think a couple things. It's going to be such a fun game, and this is like I'm much happier. This is Michigan Alabama, not Michigan Florida State. I had to put that out there. But this is going to be a great game. I think that the first thing is how does Jalen Milroe play in this kind of pressure, this kind of environment, this kind of game? He played well against Georgia, did what they had to do. How does he play against a team like Michigan? That's has a great defense, a veteran team that just doesn't flinch, that has stuck it out the entire year. I think one of the keys to the game, Jake, we've talked about a little bit, is can Michigan contain Jalen Milroe running the football? Can they contain the dynamic quarterback? Milroe has the ability to take it to the house every play. He has a 50-some yard run on the year, did it against Georgia a little bit. And when he can get on the perimeter and run, it also opens up everything in the passing game for him. So Michigan has to contain Jalen Milroe as a runner. And then I'm just excited to see Michigan from a standpoint of all the adversity all season long. I just said it, like, when I think about Michigan, I just think about that veteran roster that just is the same every week. When you turn on Michigan, what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You know that how J.J. McCarthy's going to play. How they're going to shoot. The physicality they're going to get. Is that roster and that same team and that and that leadership going to show up in the biggest moment of the year? Are they going to continue to not flinch? That's what I'm excited to see from Michigan.
I think you're spot on, man. And part of this too is like when this happened, Coach Harbaugh gets interviewed and he said, you know what, this has been like a spiritual journey for his players. And I was thinking about that, and I've started to like process this a little bit. Like it kind of has been like, man, Michigan, the emotion, the frustration. Hey, a few years ago, you're unranked going into the season. People wanted Coach Harbaugh fired. Can you beat Ohio State? Can you ever win a conference? Well, they beat Ohio State. Then they did it in Columbus. Now they've won back-to-back conference titles. Like they're breaking through old ceilings. So in a sense, like this is the perfect matchup because the next ceiling to break through is to 1, win a playoff game, 2, beat the best the SEC has to offer. Like the opportunity here is to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're the number 1 team. Now to do that, it does start and end. I think both defenses have the advantage over the opposing offense. I expect the defensive game kind of similar to how Ohio State Michigan played out in a close game. I don't think either team will blow the other one out, but for Michigan, can you contain Jalen Milroe? And part of that is like the maturity, because in order to slow a mobile quarterback down, you need to be flexible, you need to be multiple, and you need to be disciplined. And that's what Michigan is. Like I look back at how they covered Marvin Harrison Jr. And some of those coverages, I don't know if there's more than 2 or 3 or 4 teams in college football that could actually execute the calls and run the complex coverages that they did versus Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, they're not going to be doing coverages, but they'll be doing contain assignments in the same way as a principle, meaning they have to contain Jalen Milroe. The one area is Bama's pressure rate and sack rate. Like they have given up a lot of pressure and a lot of sack opportunities. That's Michigan's bread and butter. They like to bring the pressure. But what got them in trouble last year versus TCU is they brought the pressure and then they missed tackles, and then it's Quentin Johnson running down the sideline for a touchdown. So when you pressure, you give something up. So it's going to be so disciplined. The margin for error in these games is razor, razor thin. I also think, man, Saban versus Coach Harbaugh, what a matchup.
Yeah.
What a matchup. You know what I mean? What about when Michigan has the football? Bama, it's Alabama, right? The secondary is, Michigan's weapons versus that secondary is going to be a tough matchup. Colston Love, I thought Bama did a good job against Brock Bowers, kind of slowing him down a little bit. So can Colston Loveland, A.J. Barner step up? Yeah. Anything you're looking out for when they're on the field?
It's funny. I was just thinking about how, against how Bama plays defense, and they've changed it up. And Saban talked about it in his post-game press conference. Bama went to that too high shell against Georgia and kind of played that, everyone hates that bend but don't break, but like kind of played that too high, wasn't bringing a ton of pressure and against Georgia. I think they'll do the same thing. And if it's going to come down to, can Michigan run the football, right? Like, can Michigan run the ball? Because they're going to have to play in that too high shell. So when they go too high, you're going to have to be able to run the football. And if they can't run the ball, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a tough day for the Michigan offense. I think also whenever you get that too high shell and that bend but don't break it, it's a great opportunity for the guys you just said, Barner and Colston Loveland, on some of that underneath stuff when you're not getting the man coverage and you're kind of getting some of the zone stuff to be able to sit in the hole and find some open space. So those two guys are going to need a big day, and it'll be interesting to see if Bama comes out with that same strategy and tries to force Michigan to hey, we trust our front seven, we trust our defensive line. Like, you go try to run the football with
Yeah.
with against a too high shell. We're going to stop you. And then once they
Yeah.
stop you, then you can't throw it against them with the too high either. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting.
The funny, you have, sometimes as an offense, you call multiple plays in the huddle, and like one's a run, one's a pass, and you check to one or the other based on the shell. So if it's too high, you could think about it. There's two defenders are playing insurance in the back end of the defense. If it's one high, one of those safeties is in the box. So if it's one high, there's an extra number in the box. One high, you throw it because the weakness is in the back end. Too high, you run it, right? So the weakness is up front. They're lighter up front. So you're exactly right. They're going to have to run the football. Cannot wait, man. Cannot wait. Let's go to, there's been some interesting news. Man, it's been a while since we talked. There's been some crazy news that happened. So Manny Diaz is out, going to be the head coach at Duke. Now Penn State is without both their coordinators that they started the season with, playing a good Ole Miss team. I just want to give you the floor. Thoughts on where they're at as coordinators and thoughts on this matchup.
Yeah, a lot going on in Penn State world right now. It's been lost both coordinators. Obviously Mike Yurcich got fired. Manny Diaz to Duke. We knew Manny Diaz was going to be out, right? Been one of the best in the country the last couple of years, and I think Duke's a good fit for him. The challenge is at Penn State and for Coach Franklin is having to go into an offseason with two new coordinators, and two new systems. And it's tough, especially at such a crucial moment at Penn State. But these top programs, it happens it happens all the time now. You're losing coordinators constantly, and there's definitely a system in place. Penn State, or Coach Franklin hired Andy Kotelnicki, offensive coordinator from Kansas, to be the new OC, which I love. I think, everything I've seen, he's been creative and is great at putting his players in good spots and plays a lot, really multiple on offense. I also think he'll be great. He did a lot of the two quarterback stuff at Kansas with Jalen Daniels and I forget the backup's name at Kansas now. I think he'll be great with Drew Aller and Bo Pribula and using Bo some more and some of that stuff. That's something that Coach Franklin's mentioned that he wanted to see more of, is using Bo Pribula and more of the dual threat, some package plays, and they never really did. So I think he'll be good in that regard. So that overall in the Penn State community, and for what I've seen, that's been kind of a home run hire for Coach Franklin on the offensive coordinator spot. And then on the defensive side, losing Manny Diaz is tough, but that culture at Penn State on the defensive side has been implemented for a while. They've been really good for a long time, going back to Brent Pry and who's the head coach at Virginia Tech now. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. I think he has a chance to stay in-house there and hire Anthony Poindexter, who is the safeties coach, was in the running to be the head coach at Virginia. But the fact that it's taken this long may tell me, Jake, how this works. Normally, if it's going to be an in-house hire, it happens fast, right? If it's not, it starts to delay. So I think the longer this goes on, the more it looks like he'll be going outside. At the end of the day, the Penn State D coordinator's job is one of the best jobs in the country to get. So we'll see who it becomes. I think in the bowl game, though, it's really just a chance for Penn State to get some confidence going into next season. It's been a good year for Penn State. 10 wins but just the cloud of losing and really not just losing, playing very poorly against Ohio State and Michigan. It's a cloud over the program right now. And this bowl game's a chance for the young players who are coming back, the running backs, Drew Aller, some of the young receivers, the defensive guys that are replacing Chop Robinson and Deese Isaac, to get a lot of confidence and feel good about themselves. And get a chance to beat a really good SEC team. I think it's a big matchup and an important game for Penn State.
You're spot on. And in Penn State, it's a great year, but it is disappointing because, hey, you've won every game you're supposed to win, right? And that's great. That's a sign of a good team. That's a sign of a really good team. But then it's been disappointing versus the two maybe evenly matched or more challenging matchups. Well, this is one of those. It's against a damn good football team. So it's a toss-up who's going to win. Can you win that one? Boy, would that mean a lot to the season. And I just think about as this applies, who's Ole Miss and Penn State are like the yin and the yang. Like Ole Miss, high-flying offense versus stifling Penn State defense. Penn State's offense certainly has struggled this year. Ole Miss's defense, they're not the first ones off the bus. So it'll be, and I was really excited, when this initially happened. I was like, oh man, we get to see Manny Diaz versus Ole Miss. There's no way Ole Miss has seen a defense like this. So how does that affect the game? That you can't install a whole new playbook, but I'm still excited to see those guys, match up.
Have you seen Lane Kiffin, his tweets about Penn State? They've been so funny.
What's he saying? He's always good on Twitter.
He's just like, every time a Penn State player declares for the draft or opts out of the bowl game, he's been quote tweeting it and saying like, "Congrats, like enjoy the draft."
So who was it? It was Chop Robinson's declared, right?
Chop's declared. Theo Johnson, I think, announced he's going to play in the bowl game. I think
he announced, but he's going to play.
He's going to play, yeah. So yeah, we'll see what happens to Olu Fashanu, the left tackle. That'll be interesting. Jake, last thing, I know we're running out of time. What do you think about the dynamic of, for head coaches, like a lot of these head coaches know that they have internal hires they could make for Coach Franklin, this D coordinator spot. You have guys on your staff that are like, they're ready, they're in running for other jobs, but also that pressure of you need to go make a splash hire in a big name, and like there's other D coordinators or other guys you could get, and you got to balance that, right? Like, does Coach Franklin promote from within, who's like not a super sexy hire, but know he can do the job? And Coach Franklin has promoted from within before. He did it with Brent Pryde, promoted from within. He did it with Ricky Ronnie, who's now the head coach at ODU. But then also like wanting to go make that big time hire of, we just stole the D coordinator from the big time Pac-12 team. We stole a guy from here. Or even like, we stole an FCS head coach to come be our D coordinator. It's an interesting dynamic that coaches have to battle.
It's a great question, because you might say, okay, let's just start and pretend they're equal, like hiring from within, but then you say splash hire, and you might say, well, the splash hire is better than hiring from within. But here's the risk. If you hire this guy, which is the new splash hire versus within, you're learning a new system. Do you have the personnel to run that? Do you have the guys to execute that? And all of a sudden, it might be a little bit more balanced. Then you might say, hey, do I like my system? Do I think we have the personnel to continue success here? Do I think the guy that we're hiring was going to be a coordinator anyways and is a good leader? You have to weigh that. Like, you would just think logically, a splash hire is the right hire. But when you start to factor those things in, it may be different. And I think the fact is Poindexter's interviewing as a head coach. It tells you about what people think about him, his leadership, and what a benefit for them to be able to play. I do want to ask you one thing, because you're right, we are short on time here. Ohio State, Missouri. McCord transfers out. Julian Fleming transfers out. There's been a couple transfers that have went from Ohio State, and then there's been guys saying they're going to opt in and play. Missouri, this is the most important game on their schedule, and they do not care who's playing and who isn't. Yeah. To them, they're playing Ohio State, and if they can win that, it's the SEC Ohio State. Yeah. Whereas Ohio State, man, you lose your quarterback, you lose a receiver, you lose some guys. Where are you at with this matchup? Yeah. Like, is Ohio State built to overcome this?
Yeah, it's been good to see some of those Ohio State players opt into the game, because when you look at it, like you just said, Jake, I mean, this game, I had Brady Cook, the Missouri quarterback, on my podcast the other week, and like this game is like one of the biggest in program history at Missouri. I mean, they couldn't be more excited for this game. They got all their guys are playing. They've been thinking about this for the last. They just can't wait. Ohio State, it's kind of like, it almost feels like a drag, right? It's like, we gotta go play in this bowl game. Didn't make the playoff. Kyle McCord left. Who's our all the things at Missouri are about the game. All the things at Ohio State are about the portal and NIL. And who's our quarterback going to be in the future? Who are we going to go get? All that kind of stuff. But I think it'll be a test for Ryan Day as a head coach. Can he get his guys focused in a big bowl game? Like, it's a big game. It's not like some slap bowl game against an SEC school. Can he get his guys ready to go after losing their quarterback with all the distractions? Can he get them ready to go? And I think that's what I'm excited to see. How does this Ohio State come out and play in a somewhat disappointing season in still a big bowl game? Will be a test of the kind of control Ryan Day has over that team and the culture they have in that locker room. And it's a good opportunity for a lot of the guys before they bring in those new portal players that they're going to go get. Yeah. They're going to get a quarterback, Devin Brown. They're going to go get one. They're going to get another receiver. I tell you that right now. Brian Hartline's getting a big-time wide receiver in the portal. Yeah. Go prove yourself before those guys come in and let the chips fall as they may.
The kind of trend and storyline is really interesting, where it did feel like a drag. I say that because like you're coming off the Michigan loss, and then Michigan wins the Big Ten title, and it's like, gosh darn it, then McCord transfers, and then there was like 14 guys. Not all of them were like, huge losses, but the numbers were high of guys transferring out. And then you kind of put the tourniquet on and stop the bleeding, because you say Denzel Burke's going to play, Jack Sawyer's going to play, Ibuka's going to play. Guys are saying, hey, we really like Devin Brown too. Like, nothing against McCord, but he's more flexible. He can make some more plays. And I also think this, the good thing is it's always tough to lose your starting quarterback, but Ohio State won games this year because of the defense first. So the defense is going to keep them in this game. And then it's just a question of, can Devin Brown and these weapons make enough plays while avoiding the mistakes? Like, this is by no means. I think some people saw some of the guys transferring out and said, oh, well, look, Missouri's going to do it. Slow down here now. Ohio State's a damn good football team. So, okay, just to put a bow on this real quick, is there another bowl game in the Big Ten that stands out to you? I think, Utah, Northwestern, Maryland, Auburn, Iowa, Tennessee, right? We could kind of go down the list. You got your eyes on any other matchup?
Yeah, I'm excited to see the one you just said, Maryland, Auburn. I think that's going to be a good one to see. One, this Auburn team almost beat Alabama. I mean, we got to
and Maryland almost beat Ohio State.
And Maryland almost beat Ohio State back early in the season. So, I think there's good players there. I like what Mike Loxley's done at Maryland, and there was a lot of buzz around Maryland. I remember being on this show talking about early in the season how well that the trajectory of that program. So I think it's a big matchup. Anytime you get a Big Ten SEC matchup, I think it's a chance for the Big Ten to put a stamp on it. And Maryland beating Auburn would be a big statement for the Big Ten.
Both teams are the same, where it's like, man, at your best, these Maryland almost beat Ohio State, Michigan. Auburn almost beat Bama. Auburn had Georgia too. Like, they played Georgia tough too, right? So, but then at their worst, it's like, nah, I don't know. I'm looking at Northwestern Utah, because I just think about, I think Utah's favored by 7 points right now. Utah, just a tough team. Utah's been a more consistent program, and yet here comes Northwestern. Don't count them out. Why doubt them? What a chance to put a stamp on the season. I can't wait to watch.
Tough football game. Northwestern Utah, man. You can't beat that.
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be amazing. So I'm super fired up, man. Well, look, we could have talked for 2 hours on here today, so I'm glad we hit everything, for the most part that we could, and appreciate you joining me, man. It's good to see you again, and have a great holiday season. Merry Christmas to you. Can't wait to watch these bowl games and talk to them about you with you.
Appreciate it, man. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to you and all of our amazing viewers. It's been a fun season.
No doubt. All right, man. Have a good one. Take care. We'll see you guys next week.